So there is a pretty big news today from the Supreme Court of the United States, and that's specifically that the Supreme Court has decided to accept the writ of certiorari. It's called like accepting cert, C-E-R-T, accepting cert on a January 6th defendant by the name of Fisher. Fisher, along with hundreds of other defendants, myself included, my co-defendant John Strand included, was charged with obstructing statute 1512C2. 1512C2. This is a law that was passed by George Bush in 2001, I believe. And the law is to prevent witness tampering and evidence shredding. And it was in response to the Enron scandal and Arthur Andersen, the accounting firm. And it literally is to make illegal the process of somebody putting documents into a shredder and shredding it, or tampering with a witness by pressuring a witness. That's its title, and that's what it's written for. And that's always how it's been used in the 20 years since it was passed in 2001. President Bush, when he signed it into law, actually said that this law should never be used against ordinary Americans in a protest of the government. It's ironic, yeah? So 20 years later, after January 6th, the government decided to file 1512C2 charges against hundreds and hundreds of J6 prisoners, again, myself included. And it really made no sense. Again, you look at the title, it's witness tampering and evidence shredding, and it has always been used in like that kind of accounting kind of way in thousands of cases in 20 years. So really it made no sense until you understood that it came with a potential 20-year felony sentence, that you'd serve 20 years in federal prison. So now we quickly understood. So by applying and indicting and charging many hundreds of defendants with this 1512C2, these defendants all of a sudden, which might have been charged with things like trespass or parading or picketing or something like that, all of a sudden are facing a 20-year felony, which is why virtually all J6 defendants have pled out something like, for example, in my case, I took a plea for single misdemeanor trespass plea. But so there is this pressure on many hundreds of J6 defendants because of this 20-year felony. Now, when you look at the language of 1512C2, it is obviously, as is 1512C2, C and 2 are subsets of the 1512 statute itself. But the judges, in looking at it, have accepted the federal government, the Department of Justice explanation that the C2 component doesn't really exist as a subset of 1512, but kind of stands on its own. It also takes a novel definition of the word corruptly. Instead of using the word corruptly, which is in the statute, the way it's always been used, meaning that the person who engages in corrupt action would have to gain some personal benefit that would be corrupt, a corrupt benefit, a corrupt intent. They kind of said, oh, well, that's not the definition of the word corruptly. It would be a brand new understanding of the word corruptly. So this 1512C2 is extremely problematic, and that's now been accepted by the Supreme Court as a case that they're going to look at. They're going to study this case. They're going to look at this case. They're going to hear oral arguments on this case. And they're going to finally come down with a decision on if this 1512C2 shouldn't apply to any J6 defendant. That's my understanding of how they'll look at it. Of course, the case is really just about the singular defendant, Fisher, and he has some co-defendants with him, I believe. But it will, of course, apply to really anybody who's been charged with this under this 1512C2. So it is my opinion that the 1512C2 has completely been bastardized, completely been polluted, and it's been used to weaponize the government against ordinary civilians. There are people sitting in prison right now, who are in isolation or behind bars because of this 1512C2, which is now fortunately going to be heard by Scotus. I imagine it'll be heard sometime in the spring, and that we would have an answer before the summer of 2024. Again, this is a very, very big deal. The Scotus is going to hear arguments on the 1512C2 charge, which will affect and determine the fate of hundreds of J6 prisoners who were, in my opinion, wrongfully indicted and charged with a 20-year felony, which does not apply to any of them.